The gift of time. Eric Jones sat on the wide porch of his stately home, gazing out at the sprawling garden bathed in the golden hues of the setting sun. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the towering oak trees lining the driveway, carrying with it the faint scent of blooming jasmine. He took a deep breath, allowing the serenity of the moment to wash over him. At 60 years old, Eric had lived a life of perseverance, hard work, and triumph over adversity. Born and raised in a working-class neighborhood, he had faced countless challenges as a young black man trying to make something of himself in a world that often refused to see his worth. But Eric was never one to bow to circumstances. Instead, he had fought, built, and succeeded, turning his small startup into a multi-million-dollar business empire. Yet, for all his wealth and accomplishments, Eric's greatest joy came not from the lavish home he lived in, the luxury cars in his garage, or the accolades he had accumulated. No, his heart swelled most when he thought of his family, especially his grandson, Marcus. As he sipped from his steaming cup of tea, Eric's eyes drifted toward a framed photograph placed on the side table next to him. In it, a young man with bright, determined eyes and a confident smile stood in his graduation gown. Marcus, his pride and joy. The boy had just been accepted into an Ivy League university, a milestone that represented not just personal achievement, but generations of progress. Marcus had always been an exceptional young man, brilliant, kind-hearted, and ambitious. He had worked tirelessly to earn his place at the prestigious institution, never taking shortcuts or relying on his family's wealth. And now, as he prepared to embark on this new chapter of his life, Eric wanted to gift him something truly special, something that would symbolize not just success, but legacy. That's when it hit him, a luxury watch. Not just any watch, but a timeless piece, one that would remind Marcus of the values his grandfather had instilled in him: hard work, integrity, and perseverance. A timepiece that, years down the line, Marcus could pass on to his own children, carrying forward the legacy of their family. Eric leaned back in his chair, a small smile tugging at his lips. Yes, it had to be the perfect watch. A man of legacy. Later that evening, Eric sat in his grand study, the dim glow of his desk lamp illuminating the rich mahogany walls lined with bookshelves. He opened his laptop and began researching the finest luxury watches available. Rolex, Patek Philippe, Audemars Piguet. The brands were prestigious, their craftsmanship unparalleled. Each watch was a statement of power and excellence. He scrolled through page after page, analyzing different styles, mechanisms, and histories. The watch had to be elegant yet powerful, a representation of everything Marcus had accomplished and everything he would go on to achieve. As he browsed, Eric's mind drifted back to his own youth. He had always admired luxury watches, but had never been able to afford one when he was younger. He remembered walking past boutique stores as a teenager, pressing his nose against the glass, dreaming of a day when he would have the means to own such a piece. Those memories made this decision even more meaningful. This wasn't just about a watch, it was about breaking barriers. After an hour of browsing, he finally found a brand that caught his eye. Timeless Treasures, a high-end boutique known for its exclusivity and superior craftsmanship. Their collection boasted watches that ranged from classic and understated to bold and intricate. "This is it," Eric murmured to himself, his fingers tapping on the keyboard as he checked their locations. Fortunately, there was a flagship store not too far from his estate. The journey to Timeless Treasures. The next afternoon, after attending a charity event where he spoke to young entrepreneurs about perseverance and overcoming adversity, Eric decided to visit the watch store in person. He wanted to see the timepieces up close, feel their weight in his hands, and personally select the perfect one for Marcus. Dressed in a simple yet clean polo shirt and khaki pants, Eric stepped out of his black sedan, parked just outside the grand entrance of Timeless Treasures. The building exuded opulence. Tall glass windows framed the store, reflecting the warm sunlight, and a doorman in a crisp black suit stood at attention, greeting customers as they entered. As Eric walked through the glass doors, a soft chime announced his arrival. The interior was breathtaking. Gleaming marble floors, gold-accented display cases, and soft classical music playing in the background. The air carried the subtle scent of polished leather and expensive cologne. Despite the grandeur, Eric immediately noticed the shift in atmosphere as he stepped inside. The room, which had been buzzing with the murmurs of well-dressed patrons and eager sales associates, grew strangely quiet. A few customers gave him lingering glances, their eyes scanning his simple attire before returning to their shopping. But it wasn't the customers that caught his attention, it was the staff. Several employees exchanged quick, almost suspicious glances as they noticed Eric. Some whispered behind the counters, while others pretended to be busy adjusting the watches on display. Eric had seen this behavior before. It wasn't unfamiliar. Despite his years of success, despite his wealth and accomplishments, there were still people in the world who saw only his skin color, not his worth. He sighed inwardly, deciding to ignore the stares. He was here for one reason: to buy a watch for Marcus. That was all that mattered. An unwelcome reception. After a few moments of looking around, Eric approached a glass display case showcasing some of the store's finest timepieces. He admired a stunning gold watch with a deep blue dial, its intricate craftsmanship evident even from a distance. Just as he leaned in for a closer look, a young sales associate hesitantly made his way over. He was in his late 20s, sharp in his tailored suit, but there was something in his demeanor, a reluctance, as if he would rather be anywhere else but assisting Eric. Good afternoon, sir," the associate greeted, though his tone lacked warmth. "Can I help you?" Eric smiled politely, ignoring the lack of enthusiasm. "Yes, I'd like to see this watch right here," he said, pointing to the gold timepiece. The associate's eyes flickered toward the manager in the back of the store, almost as if he was seeking approval. The hesitation was obvious. "That particular model is quite expensive," the associate said, his voice carefully measured. "Are you sure you want that one?" Eric arched an eyebrow. He knew that tone. It wasn't a question. It was a test to see if he could afford it. A slow, knowing smile spread across Eric's face. He had been here before. But what the sales associate didn't know, what none of them knew, was that they had just made a terrible mistake. And tomorrow, they would learn exactly who they had underestimated. A lesson in assumptions. Eric Jones met the sales associate's hesitant gaze with a calm, unwavering smile. He could see the flicker of doubt in the young man's eyes, the unspoken question hanging between them like an invisible wall. Can you really afford this? Eric had spent a lifetime dealing with assumptions. From the time he was a teenager working double shifts to help his mother pay rent, to his early years as a struggling entrepreneur, he had faced judgment at every turn. He had learned long ago that some people only saw what they wanted to see. He could recognize the signs instantly. The subtle stiffening of posture, a half-smile of forced politeness, the way the employee's fingers fidgeted nervously at his side. They had already decided who he was before he had spoken a single word. But Eric wasn't here to prove a point. He was here for Marcus. "Yes, I'm quite sure," he said, his voice even and firm. He pointed again at the gold timepiece with the deep blue dial, its craftsmanship immaculate. "I'd like to see that one, please." The sales associate hesitated, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. He let out a small sigh, almost imperceptible, but Eric caught it. The sigh of someone who thought their time was about to be wasted. Then, with clear reluctance, the young man reached for the key on his belt loop, unlocked the glass case, and carefully pulled out the watch. As he set it on the counter in front of Eric, he cleared his throat. "This particular model is handcrafted and features an automatic movement," he said in a detached tone. "It's part of our exclusive collection, and it's priced at $25,000. Eric nodded, studying the watch intently. "Impressive craftsmanship," he murmured. He turned the piece over in his hands, admiring the weight of it. The smooth, polished finish. It was perfect for Marcus. But before he could say anything else, the sales associate cut in. "We also have more affordable options," he added quickly. "Perhaps something a little easier on the budget." Eric's fingers froze. The way he said it, the slight hesitation in his voice, the careful selection of words. It was clear he wasn't making the suggestion. He was making a judgment. Eric let out a slow breath. He had walked into countless luxury establishments before. Some welcomed him without hesitation, recognizing his influence and wealth. Others saw only a black man in casual clothes, assuming he had no business being there. Today, it seemed, was the latter. Eric lifted his gaze to meet the sales associate's eyes. "I appreciate the suggestion," he said smoothly, "but I'm quite set on this one." The employee's mouth opened slightly, as if he wanted to argue. Instead, he glanced over his shoulder toward the store manager, a tall woman in a perfectly tailored suit standing near the back. Her arms were crossed, and her sharp eyes were locked on him and Eric. Her expression was unreadable, but Eric didn't miss the way she nodded discreetly toward the associate. A silent message. Eric had seen this dynamic before. "She wants him to get rid of me as soon as possible." The sales associate turned back with a forced smile. "Of course, sir," he said, though his tone lacked sincerity. "If you'd like, I can set the watch aside while you consider your options." It wasn't a suggestion. It was an attempt to dismiss him. Eric's patience was vast, but even patience had limits. He set the watch down gently on the counter and clasped his hands together. His deep brown eyes held the young man's gaze, unwavering. "You seem hesitant to assist me," Eric said, his voice level. "Is there a problem?" The employee stiffened. "Oh no, sir. Not at all," he said quickly. "I just wanted to make sure you were aware of the price." Eric finished for him. The associate's mouth snapped shut. At that moment, the store manager approached, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. "Is there an issue here?" she asked smoothly, though the undercurrent in her voice suggested she already knew what was happening. Eric turned to face her. "Not at all," he said, keeping his voice polite. "I was just admiring this fine timepiece. I'd like to purchase it for my grandson." A brief, uncomfortable silence followed. The manager's gaze flickered to his attire, the simple polo, the khakis, the lack of flashy accessories that would indicate wealth. Her lips pursed slightly. "Sir," she began delicately, "we have a number of financing options available if you'd like to." Eric chuckled softly, though there was no humor in it. "Financing," he repeated, arching an eyebrow. The woman hesitated. "Yes," she continued, clearly trying to sound professional. "Many of our customers find it easier to make a purchase through one of our payment plans. It allows for smaller, manageable." "I don't need financing," Eric interrupted, his tone still calm but firm now. The manager blinked, thrown off by his confidence. For the first time, the sales associate beside her looked nervous. Eric took a step closer to the counter. He could feel the eyes of other customers on him now, watching the interaction unfold. Some looked amused, others curious, but none stepped in. "I walked in here," Eric said slowly, "with every intention of making a purchase, but instead of treating me like a valued customer, your staff has questioned whether I can afford it, suggested I look at cheaper options, and now offered me a payment plan before I even took out my wallet." The room grew silent. The manager's face turned red. "Sir, I assure you that was not our intention." "It was exactly your intention," Eric countered. "You assumed, you judged, and you made me feel as if I had no business being in this store." The words hung in the air, thick with unspoken truths. The manager opened her mouth, then closed it. The sales associate looked down, shifting uncomfortably on his feet. Eric exhaled, shaking his head. He had been so excited to buy this watch for Marcus. Now, the moment was tainted. Slowly, he placed his hands on the counter and gave the manager one last look. "I could buy this entire store if I wanted to," he said quietly. And with that, he turned around and walked out. An unforgettable lesson awaits. As Eric stepped outside, the crisp afternoon air greeted him. He let out a slow breath, releasing the frustration that had been simmering inside. He had dealt with this kind of treatment before, but that didn't make it any less painful. But what the employees inside didn't know, what they couldn't have predicted, was that this was far from over. Tomorrow, their world was about to shift, and they would never see it coming. A reckoning begins. Eric Jones stepped out of the luxury watch store, the cool afternoon air brushing against his face. He took a slow breath, steadying himself. His decades of success had prepared him for many things: business negotiations, corporate challenges, and financial decisions that impacted thousands of lives. But no matter how much wealth he amassed, no matter how many barriers he broke, moments like this still stung. Being judged on appearance alone, dismissed without a second thought, underestimated in an instant, it was a reality he had fought against his entire life. And yet here he was again. But this time, things would be different. As he reached his sleek black sedan, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Pulling it out, he glanced at the screen. William Clark. A small smile tugged at Eric's lips. Perfect timing. William was more than a friend. He was a brother in arms, a fellow titan in the business world. They had met nearly 3 decades ago, when William was just an up-and-coming investor looking for guidance. Eric had mentored him, taught him the ins and outs of building an empire, and over the years, they had forged an unbreakable bond. Eric answered, "William." "Eric, my man." William's deep voice boomed through the phone. "You busy?" Eric chuckled, the tension from the store fading slightly. "Not anymore." "I need you to join me tomorrow morning," William said, a hint of excitement in his voice. "Got a meeting at a luxury retailer. I think you'll find it interesting." Eric's eyes gleamed with understanding. Oh, this was going to be good. "I'll be there," he said, already picturing the look on the faces of the very same employees who had dismissed him today. William had no idea what had just happened at Timeless Treasures. But by tomorrow morning, everyone in that store would realize their mistake in the most unforgettable way possible. The calm before the storm. That evening, Eric sat in his home office, sipping a glass of bourbon as he reflected on the day. He wasn't angry. He had long since learned to channel his emotions into something productive. And that's exactly what he was going to do now. Pulling out his laptop, he began drafting an email. To William Clark. Subject: a small adjustment to tomorrow's meeting. William, looking forward to our visit to Timeless Treasures tomorrow. However, I'd like to make a slight change to how we approach things. Let's keep my involvement quiet for now. I want to see how they react when you walk in with me, without knowing who I am. I think it will make for a very valuable lesson. See you at 9 a.m. sharp. Eric. He hit send and leaned back in his chair. A small, knowing smile played on his lips. Tomorrow, they would learn. A morning of revelation. The next day, at exactly 8:59 a.m., Eric arrived at Timeless Treasures again, this time in the backseat of William Clark's Rolls-Royce Phantom. As the chauffeur pulled up in front of the store, Eric glanced at his reflection in the car's tinted windows. He had chosen a more refined look today. A crisp navy blue suit, a gold watch, from a different brand, of course, and a quiet air of power and presence. If they had bothered to look past his clothes yesterday, they would have recognized this man immediately. William, seated beside him, turned with a smirk. "So, care to tell me why we're about to give these people a wake-up call?" Eric smiled. "You'll see soon enough." The chauffeur opened their doors, and the two men stepped out together. Inside the store, a wave of excitement passed through the staff. "Mr. Clark is here," whispered a young associate. "The William Clark." Another employee gasped. Within seconds, the manager emerged, her face bright with an artificial smile. "Mr. Clark, she greeted, extending a hand. "It is truly an honor to have you here at Timeless Treasures." William shook her hand, his demeanor polite but distant. "I appreciate that." He gestured toward Eric. "This is my close friend and business partner, Eric Jones." Eric watched the shift happen in real time. The same employees who had dismissed him yesterday visibly stiffened. Their eyes darted toward him in recognition, their expressions flickering between shock, embarrassment, and panic. The manager herself paled, her fingers tightening slightly around the clipboard she held. "I see," she stammered. "Welcome back, Mr. Jones. Welcome back." Ah, so now he was Mr. Jones. Not sir, not an afterthought, not someone in need of financing. Eric met her gaze with calm amusement. "Good to see you again," he said smoothly. "Shall we take a look at those more affordable options you suggested yesterday?" The silence in the store was deafening. The manager swallowed hard, forcing a strained smile. "Mr. Jones, I sincerely apologize if there was any misunderstanding during your last visit. We value all of our customers." William raised an eyebrow. "Do you?" The staff members shifted uncomfortably, the weight of their mistake pressing down on them. "I'd like to see the same watch I was interested in yesterday," Eric continued. "But this time, I trust I'll be treated as a valued customer." The manager rushed to retrieve the watch, her hand slightly unsteady as she placed it before him. "Of course, sir. I deeply regret any inconvenience you may have experienced." Eric took his time examining the piece again. Then, without hesitation, he turned to William. "What do you think, my friend?" William smirked, arms crossed. "It's a fine piece, but after what I just witnessed, I don't think you should spend a single dollar here." The manager's breath hitched. "Mr. Clark, please," she pleaded, realizing the weight of her mistake. William wasn't just a billionaire. His influence extended across industries. A negative word from him could cost them far more than a single sale. Eric, however, simply smiled. "Actually, William, I have a better idea." He turned back to the manager. "I'll still buy the watch," he said, "but instead of me keeping it, I'd like you to donate an equivalent amount, $25,000, to a charity supporting young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds." The manager blinked, stunned. You mean, from our funds?" "Yes," Eric said. "Think of it as a small lesson in humility. You judged me before knowing who I was. Now let's see if your store is willing to invest in the very people you underestimate." The weight of the challenge settled over the room. And then, finally, after a long pause, the manager nodded. "Yes, Mr. Jones," she said, her voice carrying a new sense of respect. "We'll make the donation." Eric nodded approvingly. William clapped a hand on Eric's shoulder. "You always know how to make an impact, my friend." As the two men turned to leave, the employees watched in awe, not just of Eric's power, but of his grace, his ability to turn a personal slight into a force for change. And as Eric stepped out into the sunlight, he knew one thing for certain. They would never make that mistake again. The power of influence. As Eric and William stepped out of Timeless Treasures, the warm morning sun bathed the sidewalk in golden light. The energy in the air had shifted. Where there had once been judgment and dismissal, now there was reverence and realization. Eric could feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't about a watch anymore. This was about legacy. William chuckled as they reached the Rolls-Royce, glancing back at the store. "You always know how to turn a moment into a movement," he said, shaking his head in admiration. Eric smiled, a knowing glint in his eyes. "I've learned that if you want to create change, you don't have to shout. Sometimes you just have to be the change." As the driver opened the door, Eric paused. "Before we leave, there's one more thing I need to do." William raised an eyebrow. "Oh." Eric gestured toward a small coffee shop across the street. "Come with me." Intrigued, William followed. A lesson over coffee. The scent of freshly brewed espresso filled the air as they stepped inside the small cafe. The atmosphere was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the cold reception Eric had received at the watch store. They took a seat near the window, where Eric could still see the entrance of Timeless Treasures across the street. William leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "So, what's the plan now?" Eric took a sip of his coffee before responding. "You ever wonder why places like that treat people the way they do?" William exhaled, shaking his head. "Because they think wealth looks a certain way. They think success comes with a dress code. And they assume if you don't fit their image, you don't belong." Eric nodded. "And that assumption costs them more than they realize. It's not just about bad business. It's about a flawed mindset." William studied his friend for a moment. "And you're thinking of fixing that mindset on a larger scale, aren't you?" Eric smiled. "Always." He placed his phone on the table and tapped a few keys. Within seconds, a live press release was drafted. Timeless Treasures makes a commitment to change. Today, luxury watch retailer Timeless Treasures announced a $25,000 donation toward young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. This initiative, inspired by philanthropist and business mogul Eric Jones, serves as a reminder that true success is not determined by appearance, but by opportunity, perseverance, and integrity. Eric Jones and investor William Clark emphasized that businesses must embrace diversity and inclusion not just in word, but in action. "This isn't just about a donation," says Jones. "It's about correcting a culture of assumption and exclusion. We must move past surface-level judgments and focus on potential." Timeless Treasures has also committed to launching a mentorship program that will provide hands-on business and retail training for underprivileged youth, ensuring that the next generation of leaders is not overlooked. Eric finished typing and slid the phone over to William. "Thoughts?" William's eyes flicked across the screen. Then, with a slow smile, he whistled. "This is brilliant." He handed the phone back. "Post it. Let's make sure people see this." Eric pressed send. Within minutes, the statement was live. And within hours, the world would take notice. The ripple effect. As the press release spread across media outlets, the reaction was immediate. Business blogs picked up the story, praising the bold move and discussing how luxury brands must adapt to a more inclusive market. Entrepreneurs took to social media, sharing their own experiences of being underestimated based on appearance. And perhaps most importantly, customers began to rethink where they spent their money. The comment sections were flooded. "Finally, someone is holding these stores accountable. Thank you, Eric Jones. This is why representation matters. We need more leaders like Eric." Timeless Treasures got called out in the best way possible. Hopefully, they actually changed their ways. "I was planning to buy a luxury watch soon. Guess where I'm not shopping?" The pressure on Timeless Treasures intensified. By the afternoon, the store issued a public statement, acknowledging their mistake and reinforcing their commitment to change. Their CEO personally reached out to Eric, requesting a meeting. And Eric, he simply watched as the world finally had a conversation it should have had a long time ago. A store transformed. 1 week later, Eric returned to Timeless Treasures. This time, he didn't come alone. Flanked by young entrepreneurs from his foundation, Eric stepped through the glass doors, taking in the noticeable differences. The air was different, warmer, more welcoming. The same employees who had once dismissed him now greeted him with respect and sincerity. The store manager, her posture noticeably more humble, stepped forward. "Mr. Jones, welcome back. We've made some changes." Eric nodded, his eyes scanning the room. New posters lined the walls, highlighting the mentorship program for young business minds. A section of the store was now dedicated to education sessions on watch craftsmanship, open to anyone, not just elite clientele. But the real test. Eric turned toward a young black man who had entered the store at the same time. He was dressed in casual clothes, just as Eric had been the first time. Would the staff treat him with respect? Eric watched as an employee. A young woman who had once been hesitant to serve him approached the customer with a genuine smile. "Good afternoon, sir. How can I assist you today?" There was no condescension in her tone, no judgment in her posture. The young man hesitated at first, as if expecting to be dismissed. Eric caught his gaze, offering him a small nod. The man relaxed. "I'm interested in a watch," he said. The employee smiled warmly. "I'd be happy to help." Eric exhaled slowly. Change had begun. The manager turned to him. "Mr. Jones, we can't thank you enough." Eric nodded, hands in his pockets. "Just remember, treat every customer with dignity, and your business will thrive." He turned to leave, but not before noticing something near the checkout counter. His press release, the one that had started this entire transformation, was framed on the wall. A reminder, a lesson, a legacy. As he walked out into the bustling street, Eric checked his watch. It was time to move forward, time to keep changing the world. Eric took a final glance around the newly transformed timeless treasures, feeling a sense of quiet satisfaction. The once unwelcoming store had undergone a significant cultural shift, one that went beyond surface-level apologies and reached into the very core of its values. The young employee who had once dismissed him now greeted every customer with genuine warmth, regardless of their attire. The store's new mentorship program, highlighted in bold letters near the entrance, was already generating interest from young entrepreneurs eager to learn about business, sales, and customer relations. But it wasn't just about the store. It was about the message. The world had taken notice. Major publications were covering the story. Other luxury brands were reevaluating their own practices. And most importantly, people were talking, not just about watches, but about what true inclusivity looked like in high-end spaces. Eric turned to the store manager, who had stood beside him in silence, her hands folded neatly in front of her. She had changed too. The arrogance she once carried was replaced by humility, the weight of a lesson learned the hard way. "Mr. Jones," she began, her voice softer than before, "I don't have the words to express how much we regret what happened, but I can promise you this. We won't forget this lesson, and we won't just stop here." Eric studied her carefully, looking for signs of insincerity, but she met his gaze with genuine determination. "Good. Because true change isn't about one moment of reckoning, it's about consistent action." He nodded. "Then let this be a turning point." She swallowed hard and nodded back. "It will be an invitation of redemption." As Eric and William prepared to leave, the store manager hesitated. "Mr. Jones," she called out. He paused, turning back. "There's something else," she said, clearing her throat. "We would be honored if you would attend our next business leadership event as a guest speaker." Eric raised an eyebrow. The store manager shifted slightly. "Many of us, including myself, could benefit from your wisdom. We need to learn not just from this mistake, but from the experiences of someone who has overcome barriers most of us have never faced." There was a time when Eric might have walked away from this offer, might have dismissed it as a hollow attempt at damage control. But he saw something real in her eyes. She wasn't just trying to save face. She was trying to understand. And if there was even a chance that sharing his story could help others open their eyes and change the way they viewed the world, then it was worth it. Eric glanced at William, who smirked knowingly. Then he turned back to the manager. "I'll think about it." She exhaled, nodding. "Thank you." The celebration of change. Later that evening, Eric and William sat at an upscale rooftop lounge, sipping drinks as the city skyline stretched out before them. "You made headlines today," William remarked, scrolling through his phone. "Every major business publication is talking about your impact." Eric leaned back in his chair, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. "That's not what matters most," he said. William looked up. "No." Eric shook his head. "The headlines will fade. The real test is whether they keep their promise." William studied his friend for a moment, then smiled. "And if they don't, I have no doubt you'll remind them." Eric chuckled. "You know me too well." They clinked glasses, the weight of the day finally settling. But just as they were about to relax, Eric's phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. Marcus, Grandpa, I saw what happened at Timeless Treasures. People are calling you a legend. Eric, I'm no legend, Marcus. Just a man who refuses to accept the way things are. Marcus, that's why I look up to you. I can't wait to hear all about it when I see you this weekend. Eric, I've got a surprise for you when you get here. Marcus, a watch. Eric, maybe. But something even more valuable, too. A lesson you'll carry with you forever. Eric placed his phone down, smiling to himself. Tomorrow was a new day, and he was ready to pass down the wisdom that had shaped him, not just to Marcus, but to the world. The gift that money can't buy. Eric Jones sat on the grand terrace of his estate, watching the late afternoon sun sink behind the horizon. A glass of bourbon rested in his hand, untouched. His mind was elsewhere, drifting between the past and the present, between legacy and lesson. Tomorrow, Marcus would arrive, and Eric wasn't just planning to give him a watch. No, he was about to give him something far more valuable, a lesson that would shape the way his grandson navigated the world. Eric had spent a lifetime fighting to be seen, as more than just a man in the wrong store, the wrong room, the wrong world. He had built his empire not just for himself but for his family, so that Marcus would never have to fight the same battles. But no amount of money could protect Marcus from everything. And that's why Eric needed him to understand something very important. Money would never be enough. It was wisdom, dignity, and knowing when to speak up and when to walk away that truly mattered. With that thought in mind, Eric reached for the small black velvet box resting beside him. He opened it, the golden timepiece gleaming against the soft fabric. Tomorrow, this watch would belong to Marcus. But before he wore it on his wrist, he would need to earn its true meaning. The arrival of Marcus. The next afternoon, Eric's sleek black sedan pulled up to the private airport, where Marcus's flight had just landed. The young man stepped out, his suitcase rolling behind him, his face lighting up the moment he spotted his grandfather. Grandpa, Marcus called, breaking into a run. Eric chuckled, embracing his grandson tightly. Look at you, he said, patting Marcus's back, a soon-to-be Ivy Leaguer. Marcus grinned. I couldn't have done it without you. Eric shook his head. You did this, son. I just made sure the path was clear. As they slid into the back of the sedan, Marcus glanced at his grandfather curiously. You said you had a surprise for me. Eric nodded, his expression unreadable. I do. But first, we need to make a stop. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Where to? Eric's lips curved into a small smile. You'll see. A return to the scene. Marcus's confusion grew as the car pulled up in front of Timeless Treasures. A watch store? He asked. Eric nodded. Come on. As they stepped inside, Marcus immediately took in the opulence, the crystal chandeliers, the polished marble floors, the shimmering displays of luxury watches. But what caught Eric's attention was how different the store felt compared to his last visit. The energy had shifted. Employees now greeted everyone with the same level of attention, whether they were dressed in designer suits or simple jeans and t-shirts. It was clear the store had taken its lesson seriously. The store manager spotted Eric and rushed over, her posture respectful but not forced. Mr. Jones, she greeted with a genuine smile. Welcome back. Eric nodded. Good to see you again. The manager then turned to Marcus, offering the young man her hand. And you must be Marcus. Marcus shook it politely, still slightly puzzled. Oh, yes, Mom. Eric placed a firm hand on Marcus's shoulder. Go ahead, son. Pick out any watch you want. Marcus's eyes widened. Are you serious? Eric smiled. Completely. The young man turned toward the displays, his eyes dancing over the endless rows of pristine watches. He admired the craftsmanship, the intricate details, the weight of history and prestige behind each timepiece. As he browsed, the same young employee who had once dismissed Eric approached them. This time, his posture was different. His expression was different. "Can I assist you, sir?" he asked Marcus. Marcus, still unaware of the backstory, nodded eagerly. "Yeah, I'm looking for something special, a watch that represents something bigger." The employee glanced at Eric for a brief moment, as if seeking approval. Eric simply nodded. The young man swallowed hard before guiding Marcus toward the same gold watch Eric had picked out days ago. "This," the employee said carefully, "is one of the finest timepieces we have. It's meaningful." Marcus studied the watch, his fingers grazing over its smooth surface. "It's beautiful," he murmured. Eric stepped closer. "Son, this is the same watch I came to buy for you a few days ago." Marcus looked up, surprise. "Really?" Eric's expression darkened slightly. "Yes, but when I walked in, I wasn't treated like a customer. They assumed I couldn't afford it. They suggested I look at cheaper options." Marcus's grip on the watch tightened. "They didn't know who I was," Eric continued. "They judged me because I wasn't dressed like their usual customers." Marcus's jaw clenched. "That's messed up." Eric nodded. "Yes, but instead of getting angry, I chose to teach them something." Marcus blinked. "How?" Eric smiled slightly. "I challenged them to change. Not just for me, but for every person who walks in here after me." Marcus looked around the store, finally understanding. The welcoming atmosphere, the diverse customers being treated equally, the new outreach programs and mentorship initiatives. He saw it now. "They actually changed," Marcus murmured. Eric nodded, "because that's the power of how you handle injustice." Marcus took a deep breath, staring at the watch again. "I don't want this watch just because it's expensive," he said finally. "I want it because of what it represents." Eric smiled, proud beyond words. "That," he said, "is why you're ready for it. A gift with meaning." That evening, as they sat in Eric's study, Marcus carefully unwrapped the black velvet box. Inside was the gold watch, but to him, it was now so much more. "It's a symbol," Marcus whispered. "A reminder that how I carry myself in the world matters." Eric nodded. "You will face moments in life where people underestimate you, but remember this, you get to choose how you respond." Marcus fastened the watch onto his wrist, feeling its weight, not just in gold, but in meaning. Eric reached for his own wrist and unfastened his own luxury watch, one he had worn for decades, the very first expensive piece he had ever bought after making his fortune. He placed it in Marcus's hand. "This is for the day you pass the lesson down," Eric said, "to your own son, or to another young man who needs to hear it." Marcus's throat tightened. "Grandpa." Eric placed a hand on his grandson's shoulder. "You are my legacy. This watch, it's just a reminder of that." Tears welled in Marcus's eyes as he gripped both watches. "I won't forget," he promised. Eric smiled. "I know you won't." Outside, the city lights twinkled in the distance, time moving forward. And as Marcus sat there, holding both the past and the future in his hands, he knew. This was a gift far beyond time. The legacy that endures. The sound of the waves crashing against the shore filled the air as Marcus stood on the balcony of his grandfather's beachside estate. The sky had begun its transition from the soft hues of dusk to the deep blue of night, stars twinkling like silent witnesses to a moment that would stay with him forever. On his wrist, the gold watch gleamed under the glow of the patio lights. A few hours ago, he had walked into timeless treasures with no idea of what had transpired before. He hadn't known the battle his grandfather had fought within the walls of that luxury boutique. But now he understood, and it changed everything. He heard the soft creak of a door behind him, followed by the steady, measured footsteps of his grandfather. Eric stepped beside him, a quiet strength radiating from his presence. "Thinking about something?" Eric asked, his voice carrying that signature calm that had always made Marcus feel safe. Marcus sighed. About everything. About what happened at the store. About how different the world looks now that I know what really went on. He turned to face his grandfather, his eyes filled with something new. Understanding. I get it now, Grandpa. It's not just about how much money you have. It's about how people see you before they even know who you are. Eric nodded, taking a deep breath of the salty ocean air. That's the truth, Marcus, and it's a truth you'll have to navigate for the rest of your life. Marcus swallowed hard, glancing down at the watch. So what do I do with that truth? Eric placed a firm hand on his grandson's shoulder. You own it. You don't let it define you, but you don't ignore it either. You walk into every room with your head held high, knowing that your worth isn't in what you wear or how people judge you at first glance. It's in how you carry yourself, how you treat others, and how you demand respect without begging for it. Marcus let those words settle deep into his bones. He had always admired his grandfather's success, but now he understood the weight behind it. Grandpa, he said slowly, if you had faced that kind of treatment years ago, back when you were still building your business, how would you have handled it? Eric let out a small chuckle, shaking his head. Back then, I might have walked out and never looked back. But with time, I learned something important. Anger alone doesn't change the world. Strategy does. Patience does. Knowing when to speak and when to let your actions do the talking. That's what makes the difference. Marcus nodded, absorbing every word. Eric gestured toward the watch on Marcus's wrist. That watch isn't just about time, son. It's about a lesson. A reminder that respect is something you command, not request. And when someone underestimates you, you make sure they never do it again. Not by arguing, but by proving them wrong every single time. Marcus clenched his fist lightly, the weight of the watch pressing against his skin. He wasn't just wearing a luxury timepiece, he was wearing a story, a legacy, and he would honor it. The weight of influence. The next morning, Marcus sat across from Eric at the large wooden breakfast table, fresh coffee steaming in front of them. Eric was skimming through a news article on his tablet, a small smirk playing on his lips. Looks like timeless treasures made some headlines again. Marcus raised an eyebrow. What now? Eric turned the screen toward him. Luxury retailer Timeless Treasures launches mentorship initiative following customer discrimination incident. Marcus read through the article, seeing how the store had committed to donating not just money, but time. Time to help young business students, time to educate their own staff on inclusivity, time to rebuild the reputation they had nearly lost. And at the center of it all, his grandfather. They really change, Marcus murmured, shaking his head. Not just for PR, but for real. Eric took a sip of his coffee. That's the power of influence, Marcus. It's not just about making noise. It's about making people listen. Marcus thought back to how those employees had looked at his grandfather the second time he walked into that store. Respect, caution, remorse. They'll never make that mistake again, Marcus said with certainty. Eric chuckled. Not if they're smart. A conversation that changes everything. As the morning passed, Eric led Marcus to the study, a grand room lined with dark oak bookshelves, leather chairs, and decades of history in framed photographs. Eric gestured for Marcus to take a seat. There's something I want to talk to you about, Eric said, his voice suddenly more serious. Something bigger than just the watch or the store. Marcus leaned forward. What is it? Eric walked over to a large wooden drawer, pulled it open, and took out a single key. He set it on the desk between them. Marcus frowned. What's this? Eric met his gaze. It's the key to something you're going to build. Confusion flickered across Marcus's face. Build. Eric sat down across from him. You're about to enter one of the most powerful institutions in the world. Ivy League schools don't just educate people. They shape leaders. And the connections you make there, they'll last a lifetime. Marcus nodded slowly, still unsure where this was going. "I've built companies, Marcus. I've invested in industries. But there's one thing I haven't built yet, and I want you to do it with me." Marcus's heartbeat quickened. "What do you mean?" Eric leaned forward, his eyes burning with purpose. "I want to create something that lasts beyond us. A foundation, not just for scholarships, but for empowerment. A place where young men and women who have been underestimated their entire lives can learn how to walk into any room with confidence and leave with respect. A business incubator, a mentorship network, something bigger than just one-time donations, something permanent." Marcus's breath caught in his throat. He had never seen his grandfather this serious. Eric picked up the key and placed it in Marcus's palm. "This is the key to the first office space I bought for it. The beginning of something you and I will build together." Marcus stared down at the key, feeling the weight of responsibility settle in his chest. "But why me?" he asked finally. Eric smiled. "Because you're ready." A long silence stretched between them. Then, slowly, Marcus curled his fingers around the key, accepting his role in the legacy his grandfather was entrusting him with. Eric leaned back, his smile filled with pride. "Welcome to the beginning of something greater than wealth, greater than status. The beginning of an empire built on purpose." Marcus felt the weight of the gold watch on his wrist, the same weight of the responsibility his grandfather had just placed in his hands. And he knew without a doubt. This was what he had been meant to do all along. The end and the beginning. Eric Jones had started this journey looking for a watch. But what he had truly given his grandson was something much more timeless. A lesson, a mission, a legacy. And Marcus, he was ready to carry it forward, because some things are more valuable than time itself.